So welcome everybody, good evening, and welcome to the first formal board meeting of the 2023-2024 school year. If I can please ask everyone who's able to stand. I'm going to begin with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas, of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all Métis, Inuit, and Inuit peoples, Miigwech. I would ask everyone to please stand and join me for the playing of O Canada. I don't know, I couldn't remember. Okay, thank you very much. We're on item number 6 in eScribe. This is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda, please? Trustee McLean? Trustee Nunziata, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, and that has carried. At this time, we're going to turn our attention to memorials. If we could please stand. While we don't typically include retired staff in the in memoriam portion of our board meetings, I feel it is important to acknowledge the passing of retired Principal Richard Bilkso, as this is the first regular board meeting since his tragic passing in July. As we did at the time, I would like to once again extend our deepest sympathies to the family, friends, and colleagues of Richard. He will be remembered as a strong advocate for students, particularly for those in adult alternative education, whom he supported throughout his over 24 years in education. You may be seated. This evening, we don't have any board activities to celebrate because we are just at the beginning of the school year. But I do have some chair's announcements and remarks to make. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 2023 board meeting, our first meeting for the upcoming 2023-2024 school year. It's hard to believe the summer has come and gone, and a fresh new academic year stands before us, full of promise and possibilities. I would like to start my chair remarks this evening, as I usually do, with a brief update on our advocacy work. As you may recall, last spring we wrote to the Ministry of Education at the board's request pertaining to our funding concerns and the financial pressures we have been faced with, particularly due to the impacts of COVID-19 and the lack of fully funded statutory benefits that we are accountable for to our employees. At the time, this letter was followed up with a meeting that I attended with the Minister of Education, his Deputy Minister of Finance, and his Chief of Staff to discuss and expand on the TDSB's financial position and the challenges we faced in our budget. Colleen Russell-Rollins, our director, and Associate Director Zucker accompanied me to this meeting. We received a response to the letter over the summer. I shared the response with all trustees at the time, but I wanted to ensure that it is reported publicly, as well as the motion was a public one. The letter we received emphasized the provincial government's commitment to supporting school boards during and following the pandemic and outlined strategic investments made in Ontario's education system. The ministry's letter highlighted specific funding allocations for various areas such as COVID-19 recovery, tutoring support, and student mental health. While this funding has indeed been helpful, it does not reflect the challenges created by the true pandemic costs incurred by the TDSB, nor does it account for the ending of the COVID Learning Fund. It also doesn't acknowledge that some of this funding, like the tutoring funds, which have been immensely helpful, they were not renewed for the 2023-2024 school year. Although the TDSB managed to put many positions from the original COVID Learning Fund back into this year's budget through permission granted by the ministry using our POD funds, that's our proceeds of disposition, our use of capital funds to subsidize human resources and supports for our students rather than the modernization of our buildings and capital costs is not an ideal solution for years and years to come, and speaks more generally to the underfunding of the TDSB's needs by the government. I will note that this response did acknowledge the TDSB's concerns about cost pressures related to Canada's pension plan contributions and the statutory benefit gaps in transfer payments, and the ministry has assured us that this issue is currently being discussed at a higher level. I think it is important for us, in fact incumbent upon us, to continue to pressure the government on these issues as we look forward to next year's budget cycle, as well as to continue to outline the ways in which the current funding models do not always scale up to reflect the needs of boards as large as the TDSB. As always, I will keep you apprised of any further updates as we continue advocating for additional funding and supports for our students. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of attending an inspiring day with the TDSB's leadership team of vice principals, managers, and senior leadership executives. In my role as chair, I had the privilege of bringing greeting to the 1,000 attendees over 2 sessions yesterday. My remarks centered around our gratitude and deep appreciation to our leadership team for their commitment to students and their families, especially during the last several years where administrators have faced unprecedented challenges, as well as recognition and thank you to our newly minted leaders who are stepping up to lead at this point in time. It takes courage and a deep sense of commitment to improve the lives of young people through leadership right now, when the role of our administrators has become so complex to navigate. Finally, in the spirit of back to school, I want to tell you a little bit about what I did over the summer. During the month of July, I had the honor and privilege of participating in a journey to Poland and Israel to learn about the Holocaust, racism, and intolerance through the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center in an educational program called Compassion to Action. Together with approximately 20 other civic leaders from Ontario, Together with approximately 20 other Ontario civic leaders, education leaders, chiefs of police, Indigenous leaders, and a Holocaust survivor, we learned about the history of anti-Semitism and genocide with the goal of inspiring and empowering us to better address issues of hate in our chosen fields of work. The program provided an opportunity to gain firsthand knowledge of the Nazi genocide of European Jews and other marginalized groups. We visited several cities, museums, and concentration camps throughout Poland to gain a deeper understanding of the horrors of the Holocaust, along with how to integrate this learning into our own daily lives and work. This was a difficult trip for me and hit home in a very personal way. I am Jewish, and my grandparents fled Poland during the early 20th century due to pogroms. But despite the horror of all I was seeing and learning about on this trip, we also spent time considering a variety of related issues with explorations into social justice, injustice, hate, and discrimination in all forms. This, together with the honest exchange and reflection of ideas throughout this trip between classmates, broadened my experience and learning and has provided me with new and deeper perspectives. After learning of events in Jacksonville, Florida this past weekend, I was, like so many, profoundly shaken. In a brazen act of racist violence and white supremacy, a young white man entered a dollar store with a gun emblazoned with a Nazi swastika, and then in a racially motivated attack of the worst kind, took aim and murdered several Black Floridians. It cannot be underscored enough that these murders took place in a state where the local state government recently institutionalized and legislated the falsification of the history of slavery in Florida's educational system. Ignoring these issues is not an option. Hate continues to exist in our schools and in our communities, and according to all available data, it is on the rise in Canada. Acts such as displaying Nazi swastikas, using racist language, promoting anti-Asian sentiment, showing intolerance and homophobic and transphobic remarks are more distressingly frequent occurrences within our society and unfortunately in our schools. All of this, taken together, underscores the duty we hold to continue in our efforts to combat hatred, discrimination, and racism in all forms in our schools and in our communities. And this is something we all need to do together. It is only something we can confront together by listening to and learning from each other. I really do believe that this will be an essential ingredient if we are to create the conditions through which the other priorities in our multi-year strategic plan are able to be executed, which will, in turn, ensure that our students are best positioned to achieve academic success and reach their true potential. We will now move on with tonight's agenda. Thank you. Next up, we have reports from our student trustees and our trustees who are appointed to external organizations. And to start off, I would like to introduce we have two out of our three new student trustees who I know who were introduced to our board in the spring, but this is their first official meeting. So I would hope that we can have Ozawa Secord, our Indigenous student trustee, and Angelica Bell, One of our two other student trustees, Yikai, unfortunately is not here this evening, but if you guys could just rise and we can welcome you. We are delighted to have you. I have to tell everybody, these two wonderful young women did an amazing job yesterday emceeing the events for our leadership team. They were fantastic, and I know we're going to have a great year together. So learning from them, and hopefully being able to impart some teachings to them as well. But mostly we will be learning from them. But I want you to know it is our commitment to be of help to you, to support you, ask any questions you would like of us at any time. You can always email us. And we are just thrilled that you are here, and we look forward to when the three of you are all here together. So my understanding is you have no student trustee report. School hasn't started yet. It's their first day on the job, but they were sworn in today, so it's been a really wonderful day for them. And we wish you the most warmest of welcomes. Thank you. Okay, and it is my understanding that we have no reports from trustees appointed to external boards. So with that, we can move on to the director's report. Over to you, Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, good evening, students, staff, community members, and the Board of Trustees. I hope each of you had a relaxing, rejuvenating, and joyful summer. Here we are on the cusp of a new school year. But before we look ahead, I would like to acknowledge just a few highlights from our summer learning experiences this summer. As well, then we will move into talking about the priorities for the new school year, including some of the Ministry of Education's priorities. It's wonderful to see you all, and as I reflect on the programs offered in July and August, I am in awe. You see, our staff and community partners offered programs for over 37,000 students. That's larger than most district school boards in Ontario, to give you a sense of the breadth and the scope of the programming available for our young people as well as for our adults. In fact, the scope of programming is so considerable that I will break my summer report into two components. I'll talk about some this evening and then a few more in my September report. And I know that Systems Superintendent Peter Chang, as well as others, will bring forward their regular summer programming update to the board at a later time. This year, service included for students both online and in-person options, with a focus on creating inclusive learning environments that underscored developing student achievement and well-being. Over 8,400 students participated in elementary summer school programs from kindergarten to grade 8 at both in-person sites and remotely. Each program was locally developed to best respond to the needs and interests of each school community. One of the many highlights this summer included a partnership with the Jays Foundation for the RBI Summer Edition program. I also had the opportunity to meet with the Jays Foundation to hear about the myriad of programming that they offer with schools focused on our students throughout the year. This summer, the Jays Foundation, through this special program, was able to offer a half-day elementary school at 9 TDSB locations. As well, for many members of the board, you may remember that over a decade ago, we started the Inspire to Excel Afrocentric pre-kindergarten and kindergarten program. It has grown tremendously over the last decade. In fact, this summer it served over 300 students, fostering a sense of self-awareness, positive identity development, belonging, and of course, building a foundation for academic achievement. We also offered international languages, elementary, and African heritage programs. Nearly 1,700 students participated in various programs, and I am going to read all of the programs just to give you a sense of the beautiful diversity of students and languages spoken in the Toronto District School Board. Amharic, Cantonese, Farsi, Hindi, Korean, Mandarin, Simplified Mandarin, Traditional Mandarin, Punjabi, Romanian, Sanskrit, Tamil, and the African Heritage Program. We all know that by developing fluency in your first language and learning multiple languages has many benefits, as well as developing a sense of your own identity. TDSB also offers summer music and arts programs. Over 250 students had an opportunity to participate in a variety of programs, including band, orchestra, and strings, and even individual instruction. And lastly, but certainly not least, our summer programs included over 500 students with intensive support special education needs in various congregated and integrated summer elementary and secondary sites in July. Students were provided with the opportunity to develop and improve their academics, communication, and daily living skills, all in alignment with their individual education plans. I want to thank the hundreds of staff who participated in offering our summer programs this year for their diligence, for their care, and their commitment to students' learning and well-being. I look forward to sharing an array of other programs that were offered this summer for some of our older students in my September report. This is the time of year where, with school leaders, we look ahead, as mentioned by Chair Chernos-Lynn. At our annual school leadership gathering for our principals, vice principals, superintendents, and business leaders, we looked at what our priorities would be this year. It's an opportunity for us to collectively focus on our goals for the year ahead. In a time of tremendous change, one thing remains constant, and that's our overarching system priorities. Last year, we introduced joy, engagement, and belonging as the foundation for well-being and high academic achievement. We know in order to do that, we have to also be committed to eliminating the disproportionate outcomes we see in our data, particularly based on students' identities. Last year, we also asked our schools to focus on improving student learning based on TDSB data in the areas that you see on the screen: early reading enjoyment and fluency and literacy achievement, STEM achievement, creating viable pathways to post-secondary education, and of course, as we support our students in learning recovery or unfinished learning arising out of the pandemic. The good news is we are aligned with the Ministry of Education's priority reforms and the Student Achievement Plan. Among the directions provided in this Act and priority reforms that you will see on the screen shortly, you'll see a focus on improving literacy and numeracy achievement, as well as the number of students participating in at least one job skills program. Students participating in senior level mathematics and science courses is also another focus for the Ministry of Education and for district school boards. One of the indicators that is newly articulated by the Ministry of Education is to increase participation in school through monitoring attendance, suspensions, and students' awareness of the supports available for them to better support their mental health. This student achievement plan maps onto our multi-year strategic plan and to our data. So I know that our schools, each in their own way, based on the students that they serve, will be aligned in their school improvement efforts this coming school year. I want to reassure everyone that we will continue to hold an ambitious agenda for learning and an ethic of care for all of our students. especially those who have been underserved. Our commitment to truth and reconciliation, UNDRIP, human rights, equity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression will continue. It will be focused on improving students' learning and their engagement at school based on school data. In 2023, no student should have to leave their identity at the door to access learning or to feel a sense of belonging, safety, or respect. I know that the board stands with me in that mission. As a learning community, we have a responsibility to combat hate together as a strong TDSB community. I'm incredibly excited for the new school year ahead. As an educator, I always looked forward to the opportunities for new learning, to see the excitement and the interests of our students, and to build new relationships with staff, with students, families, and community partners. I have every confidence that this year will offer our schools and our system the same. I am deeply in debt to our facilities and business and operations staff who have worked all summer to prepare our school buildings and operations for a new school year. We're almost there, and as a young person told me recently, we're only 5 sleeps away from school starting. I also want to express my gratitude to the school leaders, the senior team, and our educators who've been preparing to open our over 500 schools to embrace the excitement and the dreams of our students. We can't wait to see our students and our staff return on Tuesday, September the 5th. This concludes my leadership report this evening.
Thank you, Director Rollins, for that very profound and wide-ranging report. So up next on the agenda, we are at, please go ahead, Trustee Pei.
On July 27, 2003, the TDSB issued a press release about its appointment of King International Advisor Group to investigate the facts and the circumstances surrounding the deaths.
This is not related to the director's leadership report, Trustee Pei. That's out of order. I'm sorry. It's also private, and I suspect this may be about going into private. So unless your question is related to the director's leadership report, I would ask that you leave the microphone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Patel.
Thank you for the report, Director. I just need to know the name of those 9 schools. You talked about Blue Jays Foundation or Jays Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I'd be happy to provide that to trustees. I don't have that committed to memory.
Thank you.
I think we have a trustee weekly coming up probably that might be able to go into. Trustee Dawson.
Thank you, through the chair. Good evening, everyone. With respect to the ministry's guidance on percentage increases or improvements that we saw on your slide, did they give exact percentages, or is that something for us to determine and then we will report back to us at the board? Just to clarify that a bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, we are expected to report on that publicly and to establish our own goals for increases.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm starting to feel a little hurt. Nobody asked me any questions. Okay, moving on. We are at item number 12. I would ask, do trustees have any declarations of possible conflict of interest related to issues on this agenda? Okay, I'm not hearing or seeing any, so we will move on. Item number 13 is matters to be decided without discussion. So I would just draw everybody's attention to the consent agenda, which includes everything except for items under number 15 and 16.2. 16.2 is a recent meeting, and then 15 are two presentations that we're going to have today. So can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the consent agenda, please? Oh, and I just realized it's up on the screen. Mover and seconder? Trustee Dawson and Trustee DeVitis, thank you. All those in favor, please. Show of hands. Any opposed? Okay, not hearing or seeing any, we will move on. That's been approved. So up next, we have our City of Toronto Safe TO update. This is item number 15.1, and I'll turn it over to staff to introduce our presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, it was over a year and a half ago that the Toronto District School Board provided support for me as director to sign on as a partner with Safe TO. We have asked them to give us an update on the work of Safe TO here this evening. I would like to acknowledge the ongoing relationship and partnership between the City of Toronto and the Community Safety and Wellbeing Office staff, as through with our Caring and Safe Schools, the Director's Office, our PSSP, our social work team, in support of the reduction of violence in communities that impacts our students and our young people both in and out of school. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Scott McLean, Manager of Community Safety and Wellbeing at Safe TO and Justice Centers, and Mohammed Sharia, Director of Community Safety and Wellbeing.
Oh, there we go. Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you, Director Russell Rollins and members of the board. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Mohammed Sharia. I'm the Director of Community Safety and Wellbeing of the City of Toronto. We're happy to here today to give you an update on our collaboration with the Toronto School Board towards Safe TO. We do have a short slide deck. I think to begin, we had a great initiative this morning with over 600 school leaders and principals, administrators from both the Toronto District School Board, the Toronto Catholic School Board, our colleagues from Toronto Police Services, TTC, Toronto Community Housing, and various different city divisions all gathered in Etobicoke to have a conversation about safety symposium and how do we build towards a safer school year. And it was a beginning of our great collaboration. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'll begin just by reminding us all that the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan is a provincially mandated strategy that the City of Toronto adopted and that the Toronto District School Board recommended in June of 2022 for the Toronto District School Board to adopt and work towards. And we've been working successfully together since that moment. Beyond overall, Safe TO provides us a framework for collaborative work to broaden the responsibility of safety to all of us and to bring together our various mandates to address safety concerns. Safe TO has 26 priorities across 7 strategic areas, and we'll go over some of the key priority areas in this upcoming year, the progress on those priorities, as well as work we've done with the Toronto District School Board. Go to the next slide, please. Some of the key priority areas this year there's 4. One is Action 1.3, which is to build out the Toronto Community Crisis Service. This is a non-police community-based crisis response team that responds to mental health related calls made to both 911 and 211. I'm happy to report back that at this point, we've responded to over 8,000 calls for service. Some of these calls for service have originated in Toronto District School Board schools, we do only serve clients who are above the age of 16. So we are working towards trying to build out the pilots, which are right now in only 4 areas of the city, to be more broadly available in all parts of our city. We will be reporting back to the City of Toronto Council in the late fall for hopefully an expansion of the service to all areas of the city. Another key priority area is developing a comprehensive multi-sector gun violence reduction plan. This is really to build out the Toronto office to prevent gun violence through this plan. And we'll be working together with our colleagues at Toronto Police Services, as well as other partners such as the Toronto District School Board, Toronto Community Housing Corporation, and others to bring together our data and our efforts to prevent gun violence. We're also we're working better to support victims of violence through the expansion of our Community Crisis Response Program, which is a program that gets initiated by the city after a violent incident to provide supports to communities. And I think also importantly, we're working to build out our data and our analytics capabilities to prevent outcomes and to share data across the board through the development of a SafeTO collaborative analytics and learning environment. Key focus in terms of emergent priorities has also been the work around areas around law enforcement reform, as well as building access to the Justice Center services and responding to the calls made in the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls inquiry. And City of Toronto has been working with our Indigenous Affairs Office as well as our Indigenous community partners to advance the recommendations in that call. My colleague Scott will go over the collaboration we specifically have been doing with the Toronto District School Board, as well as some of the upcoming work we have together.
Thank you for having us here tonight. And again, thank you to Director Russell Rollins, Executive Superintendent Jim Spropoulos, the Caring and Safe Schools team, social work teams, and all of the other units who actively participate with us in the implementation of SafeTO. Through the implementation so far is committed to advancing the board's adoption of the collaborative approach to our school and community safety and well-being report that we attended when it was adopted, and we've been actively involved in advancing elements of that report. I'd just like to provide some very high-level outcomes and examples about how we are sort of demonstrating this collaboration, engagement, and how we are moving in an integrated way to support students, family, and well-being. We've broken it down into 4 distinct areas to speak at a very high level. So the first is enhanced collaboration. And so through that report, you as a board and the staff have launched an expert panel, and Anthony Morgan, our Senior Strategic Advisor of Intersectional Social Justice from Social Development Finance Administration at the city, co-chairs that table with TDSB to make sure that we have an integrated approach to supporting that work and to bring to bear city opportunities and city resources to do that. We additionally have Serena Officer, the Manager of Community Safety and Wellbeing at the city, actively participate and has presented data and initiatives to the table for consideration. Director Russell Rollins participates on the SafeTO Executive Leadership Table, which will resume its operations in the fall, and that's an oversight body for our multi-sector violence reduction work. Toronto District School Board staff from multiple different areas continue to participate in integrated safety coordination teams that are aimed at the reduction of violence. They work across the city in 6 geographic zones that we've identified by integrated data and mobilize violence prevention and intervention strategies at the local level. And they work with the broader community as well as the administrations in schools. The ongoing work of those tables is really about enhancing protocols for collaboration and communication so that we can strengthen our outcomes collectively. The second area is around engagement. And so one of the things that we heard from TDSB parents was needing access to city services. So we partnered with the Toronto District School Board staff to jointly plan service fairs. The first one was on June 10th in the East District of the city. And at that session, families learned about local services that they connect to, employment opportunities, and how to access schools, and bring in city supports and community-based supports, to run programming and other things. And so it was very successful. And over the coming school year, both TDSB and the city will expand this initiative into other areas throughout the school year. Both TDSB staff and city staff are assessing the alignment of TDSB launched community safety committees. The city also has a number of community safety committees, and we're looking at the alignment to avoid duplication and ensure that we are engaging a broad section of residents and community stakeholders to advance school and community safety and well-being. And as my friend here, Mo, talked about, today we had a very successful event where over 600 administrators from the Toronto District School Board and the Toronto Catholic District School Board came together with multi-sector partners to proactively plan for the upcoming 2023-2024 school years. Is really integral to this work that we take a multi-sector approach, because no one entity can, sort of respond to the urgency, complexity, and necessity of what community requires when we are aiming to prevent violence. The third area is programs and services. So we continue to collaborate on the development of programs and initiatives that prevent violence and promote healthy youth and family development. Recently, the city had launched the Towards Peace program in the Northwest. And as we look to expanding into the East region, we've been working with Toronto District School Board staff to engage teachers, administrators, students on what that program could look like. It is a violence interruption program that sort of builds the capacity of grassroots leaders and people with lived experience in the areas of violence, trauma, and anti-Black racism to build their capacity to prevent violence in their communities. We'll continue to work with the board on that. And we're strengthening how community supports can better support school-age children and their families. And that's an ongoing shared responsibility for all of the institutions involved in the Toronto Office to Prevent Violence. The fourth area is integrated investments. And so a goal of SafeTO is to integrate our investments to ensure that we're maximizing the tools, resources, and mandates we have at the local level. For example, the city recently allocated $2.7 million in youth violence prevention grants to 13 local community agencies and 12 grassroots partners for up to the next 3 years. To advance our collective partnership work with TDSB, the city modified the selection criteria to ensure that organizations selected are servicing school-age children in the areas that they were selected in, and that we develop an intentional partnership with the board so that, and both boards we've done this with, so that those programs can benefit from the infrastructure of TDSB and the connectivity to the students that you have, as well as be responsive to the needs that teachers and programs like Caring and Safe Schools identify. And so this is a creative way about leveraging our investment and aligning it with a joint sort of priorities. Through federal investments, the city has also funded centrally assigned principal to work with the Toronto Office to Prevent Violence. We are excited to announce that Jason Kennan-Carey will be working with the city and other multi-sector partners to advance community safety and well-being and the reduction of violence. We will also be investing in the TDSB in Dr. David Cameron's team to have a research coordinator work with our SafeTO collaborative analytics and learning environment to help link our data where appropriately and look at collective insights across our institution aimed at the prevention and upstream prevention of violence. With that, I can go to the next slide and just talk briefly about the work ahead. So obviously there's a lot to build on. We've been very busy and working through our collaborations. And so our priorities for the remainder of the 2023 calendar year are onboarding both the centrally assigned principal into the Toronto Office to Prevent Violence, as well as onboarding the TDSB research coordinator onto our SafeTO collaborative analytics and learning environment team. Once they're onboarded, we will co-develop work plans between the TDSB and the city that enhance collaboration through protocols and accountability, conduct collaborative analytics and learning across our institutions to advance preventative outcomes, implement and evaluate public health approaches, trauma-informed approaches, and culturally responsive approaches to violence reduction that advance community safety and well-being in communities and in schools. We'll thoughtfully engage community partners to empower them to lead the implementation of SafeTO through the implementation of your community safety committees and other engagement platforms that the board has. And we will be developing communication campaigns that contribute to the prevention of violence. That, I'll hand it back over to Mo for some just final remarks.
I think we'll just go straight to any questions you may have. And again, thank you, Director Russell Rollins, for inviting us.
Thank you very much, Mo and Scott, for your presentation and more importantly, for your ongoing work in partnership, particularly with our Caring and Safe Schools team led by Executive Superintendent Spiropoulos, and the work that you will be doing in partnership with Jason to create a pathway for our organizations to navigate each other in order to better serve our young people. Through you, Chair, the team will take any questions that trustees may have.
Okay, we will start with Trustee DeVitis, and then we'll follow with Trustee Laskin.
Thank you. I'd like to first start by thanking the folks from the city for coming down and making a presentation, and thanking them for the work that they've been doing. I know that together with other folks, Toronto Police Services and others, we've had some really significant successes in the last year or so. For those of you that don't know the statistics, just on the website for the Toronto Police Services, as of today, is a 22% reduction in shootings from last year, and a much bigger reduction compared to pre-COVID levels. And that's a collaborative effort that has emphasized preventative measures. And I want to highlight that because that's really important for us in a school system that has been the focus of criticism around our ability to be proactive. That we're working collaboratively with the City of Toronto and with other actors is really significant, I think. And I think it's the way forward for us to really be able to get at the causes of violence. With that, a couple of questions for our guests. We talk about mental health, and I saw that there may be a motion around mental health coming forward. What are the type of mental health services that are being made available? I know that with the rollout of the Toronto Community Crisis Services, one of the criticisms is that we don't often have the services in the back end to be able to help people that are suffering from mental health issues. What are the type of preventative services that may be available for our students? And what are the type of services that are available for students after there's been a crisis?
And so just a clarity is about mental health services that are being provided. So in addition to the Toronto Community Crisis Service, there have been some grants community grants that have been mobilized through the Toronto Community Crisis Service. That grant call is currently underway. We are also leveraging community healing projects and community violence and wellbeing recovery projects to support mental health needs for individuals specifically impacted by community violence. Lastly, we'll continue to work with Toronto Public Health and their efforts to support ongoing development of mental health in the City of Toronto.
And if I could ask a follow-up question to the Chair, do you think that we currently have an adequate service level for the demand that is out there from our students and from students from other school boards?
I think what we've heard from community is that there is a greater need than there has been services available. And certainly with the impacts of COVID, we've seen significant number of service providers overwhelmed as well as closed. And we've seen that the it's been reported on that the mental health challenges faced by students have been higher and youth have been higher, and the service provisions have not kept pace. So there's certainly an imbalance.
Thank you for that. Slightly different question through the chair. I know that we've had a school board real difficult time making our spaces available to community organizations in the way that we would have preferred due to changes to our budget envelope and funds that were made available for space utilization that are not available anymore. Is any part of the collaboration with the City of Toronto and other stakeholders to try and maximize the use of school space in order to allow for healthier, more vibrant communities that may, again, help bring the rates of incidents down and help with issues around inclusion, social services, and all the type of activities that create positive environments?
I can speak to two different approaches that that we've been exploring. This is all evolutionary work, but coming up to the summer, so prior to this summer, we did a bit of a mapping with our collective integrated safety coordination teams about events and initiatives over the summertime, and we assessed, just what kind of supports they needed in various areas. So if they were in a Toronto community housing community, what kind of presence was needed to support the event. And we also identified where there were, sort of camp programs that are supported by our Parks, Forestry, and Recreation that were actively involved in working in TDSB areas. And so we were able to use our partnership to identify those and work with the Toronto District School Board to be able to assess and in some cases fast track those particular permits. In other areas, as we implement the youth violence prevention grants that we talked about that are just rolling out now, we, as I explained in the update, have identified, in the criteria that a partnership with both the Toronto District School Board and Toronto Catholic Board is required as part of the grant process. And so those individual programs, as they develop their work plans and implement their programs, are identifying their space needs, and the members of our integrated team will assess the permits process and educate them about the process, and in some cases, help steward that, I'm sure.
Thank you. And I guess the last follow-up question to that, or rather a comment or a suggestion, is for us to look at how we may better be able to share our school communities, the spaces, to allow more organizations to have access to those spaces. That is a particular pinch point that has generated a lot of issues, I know locally for me, with different community organizations coming out of COVID, not being able to access spaces that they used to have due to, again, systemic changes that have increased the cost for them, right? So how do we create access to space? That's something that maybe some collaboration can create some really efficient uses for dollars, for our shared dollars. That's something maybe for the team to take back and consider with more detail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Didavides. I'll just, we have you on the list, Trustee Hastings. I just want to note that the presentation from this evening has been shared with trustees, and it will also be included as part of the record from this meeting. So I just wanted you to know that as we move on with questions. Up next, we have the order of questions that we have is Trustee Laskin, Hastings, and then I'm on the list as well.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you to the city. Is there a timeline? There's some ambitious next steps forward. Is there a timeline by which you hope to accomplish?
Within the year. Yep, within the year. So
within the year.
So for the there's different actions that we talked about. So for the implementation of the Toronto Office to Prevent Violence, before the staff were identified, we have been working in an integrated way with integrated safety coordination teams. Now we are pulling together the team. So the Toronto District School Board staff has just started. So, in terms of our agreement, we're going to build the work plan over the next 30 to 60 days. And then once the work plan is established, we'll be moving on. And as it's being developed, to be totally honest, we'll be moving on implementation. And this is ongoing work. What the new resource brings is greater opportunity to have not only a strong collaboration, but dedicated TDSB support to our multi-sector efforts.
Okay, thank you very much. And how is the youth voice represented in itself? Is the Toronto Youth Cabinet involved, or are students involved in some way?
Yeah,
For
so
you, Madam Chair, sorry.
through a lot of our ongoing efforts at the city, we are doing engagement. So SafeTO in itself is based on engagement with over like 4,000 to 5,000 people. Toronto Youth Cabinet played a pivotal role and will continue to play a pivotal role. And throughout the coming year, we will be engaging at the local level. As we develop this plan, we'll be engaging students and would welcome the student trustees to also work with the Toronto Youth Cabinet as they support the implementation.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, next up we have Trustee Hastings. Please go ahead.
Afternoon, gentlemen. Through you to Madam Chair. When you set this collaboration with the TDSB and yourself, SafeTO, will there be a contact? Because a good portion of what I'm seeing is when there's a problem, there is no contact. There is no place where you can actually reach out and touch somebody. Somebody sees something, they can't say something. Will there be a contact area, a contact number, a contact email where you can be contacted? Because a good portion of what I see is a lot of people do not have, a lot of employees do not have time to say, I'm going to look at you and say, I'm going to help you fix this problem, or a good portion of the things that happen are problems that can be nipped in the bud, right at the bud. And they then go on to be serious problems. You call them mental health, but I call them serious problems. We don't have anybody to look out and say, I'm going to help you with this. Will there be an area that we can contact somebody, or they themselves, people in crisis, will be able to contact somebody and say, hey, I got a problem, or hey, I see a problem happening or developing? Because a lot of the times, development of a problem not noticed until it's too late. You, Madam Chair?
Thank you, Trustee, and through Madam Chair. That's precisely the work that we're trying to build out in terms of the contacts. This today with the 600-person conference was to build that connection between school administrators, the Toronto Police Services, the City of Toronto, partners from the provincial government, partners from the Toronto Community Housing Corporation, to put a face to a name, to be able to provide that connection beyond the school to their partners so that people could see who they can reach out to. Secondly, the work that the team and I do, we are the stewards of the SafeTO program, so we can serve as the main point of contact. We're working with Superintendent Siropoulos and Director Russell Rollins to engage administrators to allow them to know who we are, trying to put our faces out there. And then with the addition of Principal Jason, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Kanakari, that provides a main point of contact for school administrators directly into city programs, city support, city resources. My colleague, Scott, can expand upon other ways that we're building out contact. But before I wrap up, in terms of any potential issues that people may have noticed, in terms of the Toronto Community Crisis Service, which is admittedly only in 4 areas of the city, we are encouraging the public to call 211 if they believe somebody could benefit from in a mobile in-person visit for mental health support or crisis support. And we can share the details with you afterwards.
And just to add a couple of other points. So as Mo said, TDSB will have an institutional lead as a point of contact and, to ensure that information is coming into our collective multi-sector office, but also flowing into your organization and to your board. Additionally to that, I think there's two things that you said that really resonated with me. One was, who do I just get someone on the phone? And, this is where we have to do some education. So for example, if a violent traumatic incident happens in your community or your school, the city's community crisis response program signs someone. There's a staff. We send out incident alerts that administrators will receive. They will get that staff contact. They know exactly who to contact. Their cell phones provided, their emails provided. For 24/7 mental health, like Mo had talked about, and there's other examples about that. So we have to do a better job of educating you. But the other part that I wanted to pick up on about what you said, which is really critical and one of the founding priorities of SafeTO, is if we see a problem developing. So Mo talked about upfront that SafeTO is about shifting how we think about safety. Historically, safety was about crime, it was about policing, but really safety and what we're trying to do through SafeTO is about centering the well-being of people and places. And we do see when people are struggling. We do see when, hey, if we don't address this now, it could manifest into something else. And the culture that we need to change in our organizations, in our institutions, is that we need to be able to identify the potential for risk or the potential for greatness in the young people that we're working with, and do everything within the full scope of our collective tools and mandates to be responsive to that. So thank you.
Thank you. And just with your indulgence, I believe the director would like to comment as well in addition to answer your question. And then I'm happy to go back to you. Does that make sense, Trustee Hastings? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. Thank you to Mohammed and to Scott for providing the means to contact SafeTO. We also ask our students, our school staff, our principals, our other site leaders, where there is a problem, they may contact Caring and Safe Schools, their superintendent. Depending on the nature of the issue or the risk that's being presented, we have managers of social work in each of the learning centers who also routinely respond to crises situations. Of course, in the most serious of situations where principals or site leads determine it's appropriate, they may contact the Toronto Police Service directly for intervention. So there are a number of avenues for support depending on the nature of the issue that's being presented and the degree of risk that is being assessed by staff. But I do want to assure everyone that our Caring and Safe School staff do respond directly to principals and staff where appropriate. And lastly, in September, we will be launching a student app that's being piloted across several schools where students, as Scott just referenced, where they identify that there is a risk, they will be able to report it as well.
Okay, thank you, Director. Trustee Hastings, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There be one other comment, and that is the contact of said individual, said program. Will it be near instantaneous? I've had dealings, we've had dealings, or we've tried to actually, according to the director, phone the police, and it's a lost cause as to time. It takes time. You're on the phone waiting for, I don't know what, but you can be on the phone for a very long time. Will we be able to speed up this process to near instantaneousness?
I think through the chair, I think that's a broad question that I actually can't answer because there is a wide scope of issues. And so you brought up a policing issue. The Toronto Police Service is best answer to that. If it has to do with 24/7 mental health support, My colleague Mo talked about what that could look like. If it's response to a violent traumatic incident, either through Caring and Safe Schools or ours, that's pretty direct and instant through our communications. And if your TDSB staff can't get a hold of our team, Jim's calling me at night. So it's that's sort of built in. But what I would say is there's always improvement for that access to resources. And so if you are, as an institution or within your areas that you represent, experiencing those kind of delays, I would encourage you to filter that through the Caring Safe Schools team, who can bring it, or Jason, who's recently been hired to bring it to our multi-sector team, because we can problem solve those, because we now have people from multiple institutions that can problem solve those kind of situations. Thank you.
Trustee Payne. Okay, next up we have, okay, sure. Yeah, Trustee Pay, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I want to ask, safety or staff, what is the root cause of the increased violence in our city?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The root cause of increased violence in our city lately.
Well, the stats don't show there's been an increase in violence. The stats show there's been a decrease, but the root causes of violence are oftentimes related to social determinants of health, people living in conditions of poverty, lack of opportunities, and people being exposed to crime and violence.
Okay, so in terms of city's position, how city would deal with these root causes? Do you think the root causes really cover everything? What about our, bailing system? Do you think our bailing system really working? Because I heard in the news is a lot of multiple defenders, they're on bail, they're committing the same time crime on the street.
Trustee, I can't speak on bail. That's something that's better addressed towards Toronto Police Services.
Okay, so as a school board, the largest school board in Canada, we have most of 1 year this past year. So I don't really know number. Through Madam Chair, may I ask the staff to give me the number for the violence, for last year compared to previous years?
Would someone from staff be able to remind Trustee Pay?
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, I would ask Executive Superintendent Sparopoulos if he has those numbers. I do know they are available in the Safe Schools report presented in the spring of last year. Executive Superintendent Sparopoulos may be able to access them.
Thank you, Director Russell Rollins. And through the chair, just sent an email about that tonight that I'm trying to find right now. And we had the number as you were updated on in the board report of May 17th, 2023, which provided an update, the second update to the collaborative approach to school and community safety. And I'm just trying to get that exact number here in a minute, because as I said, I just sent it in an email to
Perhaps you could follow up with
to Executive Officer Bird, who
Great
just
work, guys.
handed me his laptop. And at April 23rd, which was our last counting before that report, we had 323. But I think it's important to clarify this important point, that the figure actually represents the number of students involved in violent incidents as opposed to the number of occurrences. What this means more specifically is that any one occurrence may generate multiple violent incident reports depending on the number of students involved. Now, what typically happens, Madam Chair, is we roll the numbers up at the end of the school year and we report them through the ONSIS portal. And there has been a delay related to that specific part of our work. But I can tell you that we will have those numbers imminently. And again, I think it's important to say in a very open and transparent manner that there are more of them in the 2022-23 school year than we have experienced in the past. So I don't have the exact number right at this moment, but it's imminent. And we're doing our best, obviously, to report it through other sources that we are working within the board at this point in time as well, as you may know. Thank you. Hope that helps.
So, through Madam Chair, just want to clarify with, Executive Superintendent Saropoulos. So those number is up to date, end of April. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct.
So basically, we're missing 2 months of data. Okay, so even without that last 2 months data, we still have the highest number of violence at our board. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is absolutely correct.
Okay. Now I have a question for the staff and also for the CFTO staff as well. So what kind of collaboration you think TDSB should have with the CFTO, also with the TPS, Toronto Police Services, to improve the safety of our school?
So through you, Madam Chair, as I think we have made evident through the collaborative approach to school and community safety, the work of making and creating and supporting safer communities and schools goes beyond the reach of any one entity. So if we're going to make improvements in this area, there has to be cooperation and coordination between all levels of government, school boards, community agencies, organizations, and faith groups. And that includes a very close collaboration with not only SafeTO, but the Toronto Police Service. I think in the May update that we provided some more information about how that's occurring, but let me give you a couple of very specific examples. For a lot about programs and how important programs are, especially during out of school hours. I think the ministry recognized that as well when they funded us for $1.8 million to support the delivery of programs not by TDSB, but by community agencies who are most connected to community, who have roots in community, and who are of community. So just this summer, as many of you know, through the work of the local tables which have been created, we had 13 programs which served over 2,000 students. I think there was one in every single corner of our city. I think we had tremendous outcomes from those programs in terms of the relationships, and I think more to come with respect to the summer update. So additionally, since the last report, we have had 2 separate summits with the Toronto Police Service. The board directed us in 2017 when the SRO program ended to find ways to be in close working relationships. Today, the focus of having 600 school administrators in one room was so that principals could sit with their local divisions. That's the most important relationship with respect to TPS and TDSB. The director has made a commitment, and we've sat down with the chief of police, and we're having these conversations up here. But when the rubber hits the road, schools need to be able to contact someone. And today they sat at those tables and exchanged information. So that work is continuing, it's ongoing. So it's not just a primary response, so when something goes wrong. It's to work in ways through the programs, for example, to be preemptive, but also when something goes wrong, that we know who to call so you're not sitting on the phone waiting for somebody to answer. I think Scott and Mohammed went to great lengths to explain how things are continuing to work with SafeTO. I think it's important to note that there's a combination of interventions for us, because part of it is what we're doing every day through programs and relationships, but there is larger systemic work that has to happen as well, which connects closely to our commitments to equity, human rights, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. We can't leave that behind in this work because it's so deeply connected, and it will continue in our board. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have another question for CFTO staff. I will ask you the city's position regarding the drug injection site.
Sorry, city's position in regards to,
Yeah, or you can say safe injection site, but to me, I think it's a drug injection site.
So the Toronto Board of Health is leading the work on the sort of ongoing implementation of community or consumption treatments services, otherwise known as safe injection sites. And the city is working with our own providers. So Toronto Public Health operates one of those facilities, and there are several other programs that the city has no authority over, but is actively working to work with the local community agencies and organizations that facilitate those conversations. And so we'll continue to work with those organizations as well as other partners through SafeTO, such as Toronto Police Service and other organizations, to ensure that the safe operations of those sites and the safe community safety and well-being issues in and around those sites.
Oh, okay. Also, representing my community, have a very typical question regarding our community. What's a SafeTO's position putting a safe injection site in front of the senior housing?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of the question.
Putting a safe injection site in front of the senior housing. Was that cause? Yeah.
Trustee Pei, I would just ask for you to reflect on whether what this has to do with work as a school board and how it, like, whether this relates to what the presentation was about.
I understand, but we're talking about SafeTO, right? So if we don't have a safe.
We're talking to
Toronto-
about their work with schools, in particular with their partnership with
Okay,
TDSB.
all
So I
right,
would
Madam
just
Chair.
ask you to keep your comments related to the scope of the presentation, the work that they're doing with our school.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I have my last question. So in term making our school safe, so what is the SafeTO think the root cause of causing the violence at our schools?
The root cause?
For schools.
So I believe Mo identified that, but there are root causes in communities such as poverty, racism, access to services, and exposure to violence that contribute to unsafe conditions in schools. Because when those root causes are left unattended to, they can manifest in different ways with the inability to participate at school. It can, in some cases, also result in violence.
Okay, so how SafeTO can assist us to collaborate with the Toronto Police Services to make our school safe?
So we have created a sort of multi-sector office to prevent violence. And embedded in that office is a Toronto District School Board staff, a Toronto Community Housing staff, a Toronto Police Service staff, several city staff, and we will be embedding community partners to develop a multi-sector violence reduction plan and approach. And so we will be doing that through protocol development to create an all-of-systems approach to our responses to violence. We will be working with multiple partners to develop public health rooted interventions to reduce violence as part of that office. And we will be using data and analytics and evidence to inform that work.
So does SafeTO think is drug use actually cause those violence increase?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Drug use, drug use.
What's your question about drug use? Sorry, I have poor hearing.
So-
I apologize.
Okay, does
Wait,
SafeTO think the drug use actually lead to the increase of violence in our city? Does the SafeTO have any plan to treat those people on drug, get them out of drug?
SafeTO has 7 strategic goals and 26 actions across those goals. One of those pillars is around reducing vulnerability And that includes dealing with mental health related issues, implementing the Toronto Community Crisis Service to do that, and better supporting individuals who use drugs.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Trustee Pay. Up next, we have Trustee Nunziata. Please go ahead.
Chair, thank you, Mr. Hure and Mr. McCain and all the staff at SafeTO for tonight's presentation. My question is about confidential information about students who are under 18 years of age. As we know, students in our system are mostly under 18, and we have a responsibility to confidentially handle their information. How does SafeTO and the TDSB facilitate the flow of that confidential information without breaking any rules or barriers there? Like if there is a threat in our school community involving a student under 18, it's not an immediate threat, but an evolving threat that's clearly going to result in something. How is that information confidentially shared without it being sent out to a larger network of volunteers when it's not needed?
Thank you very much for that question. It's a really important question. And it's at the crux of work that we've been doing at the city for quite some time. So to give you an example, Toronto District School Board is an active participant of Focus Toronto, which is a situation table model in which multi-sector partners assess situations. The current, sort of legislation around privacy really enables information sharing and privacy under certain circumstances. And what really it comes down to is the assessment of the level of risk in those particular situations. And the legislation is actually a tool to enable us to safely share that information only when required, only when needed. And the legislation further outlines your responsibilities as a practitioner and your authorities to either share that information and or receive information. And so we are using privacy legislation as a guide and a crux for any work that we do. And no personal information would be shared without the consent of an individual first and foremost. And if it's at a level of acutely elevated risk, the legislation provides avenues in which that information can be safely disclosed only to the parties that require that information to perform their mandate to reduce that level of risk.
Thank you. So if I'm hearing correctly, it's a combination of SafeTO staff and TDSB staff who make that assessment?
Do you want to speak to your current?
So through the chair, that's correct. And I think there's one point that we have to make absolutely clear. And just further to some of the conversation that's been happening earlier, Toronto Police Service also plays a role in this. Because if we're faced with a situation where there are exigent circumstances, and that was part of the conversation today, the Toronto Police Service made it very clear to us, when people's lives are at immediate risk, and they present us with a statement that says, we are operating here under exigent circumstances where there is a tremendous risk, we have a duty to share that information with them at that point in time. And that takes precedence, again, with respect to people's lives and the public safety being at immediate danger. Anything else that we disclose to the Toronto Police Service has to come through a production order.
Thank you. So if it was an evolving danger, if it was not immediate, but there was a concern that it would evolve, would that be shared?
So through the chair, depends on the parties. So as we're working through a situation, we have to take into account an assessment of the level of risk. And as those situations unfold, the cooperation is really not minute to minute, but second to second with a group of people who are part of whatever assessment group is in place at that moment in time. And that would typically involve someone from the Toronto Police Service and typically the Toronto District School Board. The City of Toronto isn't always involved in situations like that that have to deal with TDSB. And for those of us who've been involved in those situations, there is that moment in time when TPS has taken over responsibility for those types of situations. And that is who directs us in those moments. And it could change at any second. So when TPS is saying to us, we don't need, something just happened, we need that information right at this second. Those situations are so fluid and unfold so rapidly that they require that type and that level of intervention, which is almost immediate in nature. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. I have a separate question. I heard in your presentation, supports were available for students 16 and over, and you alluded to supports being available for students 16 and under. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. Through the chair, the Toronto Community Crisis Service is a pilot in only 4 areas of our city. It launched in March of 2022, and as part of the city's parameters, it was launched as a mental health crisis response service in the 4 areas for those who are above the age of 16. The city is reviewing the pilot to see how we can expand it so we can respond to all residents, but right now we only respond to those above the age of 16. This is largely due to questions around consent and the ability to serve people under the age of 16.
Thank you. I think the focus on students under 16 would really help these situations before they come to a head. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pass the chair to the vice chair of the evening, Trustee Williams. I have a question, a comment.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Trustee Chernos-Lynn.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for coming this evening. The partnership with SafeTO is starting to really come together, and it's exciting to see the collaboration that I think is really unprecedented between all these different services and providers and levels of government. It needs to grow even more, but I think we are definitely on the right track, and I am so pleased to see the collaboration and everyone working together, because the reality is the city and the TDSB and other school boards and TPS, we've often been off in our own silos. And the reality is we serve the same students. We may not serve the same students as the TCDSB, but our students find each other, they're out together, they become friends, and they're experiencing the same challenges. So we need to support everyone together. And I think that's really where the magic happens. I just wanted to tell you that, this is through the chair, I did speak to one of my superintendents this afternoon who happened to mention that he was at this event today and how impactful it was and how great it was. And in particular, we had a conversation about the police that he liaised with today. And there was someone we both knew who had made a connection. And I think it's all about relationships. So with kids, it's about relationships, but also with the adults and all the different providers. So this shows real promise, and I'm very grateful for the leadership from your team at SafeTO working together with our team and the other teams around the city. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I'll pass the chair back to Chair Chernos-Lynn.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions. So thank you very much for that presentation. And just a reminder to trustees that you can refer back to that presentation. It's in your email from this evening, because I know there was a lot in it and a lot of information that came forward tonight. Up next, we have item number 15.2, and this is an update from Toronto Public Health. I'm assuming that Toronto Public Health is zooming in. Am I correct in that?
Yes. Benita's online.
Okay, wonderful. So Dr. Dubé is online, I'm understanding, and I'm going to turn it over to the director to do introductions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, it is my pleasure to welcome someone that is very familiar to the Toronto District School Board, Dr. Vinita Dubé, Associate Medical Officer of Health, to provide a public health update as we begin the new school year. Welcome, Dr. Dubé.
Hi, through the chair and to the rest of the committee. Hello, and thank you for having me. I have a short update for you. We're in a very different place this year, so happy to discuss where we're at, and glad to hear that people have had good summers. Okay, next slide, please. I do also send regrets from Nicole Welsh. She may be calling in, but she may not be able to make it tonight. So as we head into the fall, we are all familiar with, return to school. What does that mean? Well, it's not necessarily because of school, but it's really as we head into the fall, we know that respiratory virus activity increases. And so we heard a lot last year about what was called the triple-demic of RSV, influenza, and COVID-19. We know that there are many other viruses, as well as those three, that will increase in the fall. We know that some of them can be more serious in children. So RSV and influenza in particular can be more serious in children. And in fact, Australia saw that this past season. Their winter is ahead of ours, so we kind of look to them. What we also know from Australia and New Zealand is that the flu that circulated there was a good match to the vaccine. So that's hopeful for us. And so in the fall, both flu and COVID boosters will become available. And so getting vaccinated will be one of our key tools to preventing that illness in the fall and winter. Next slide, please. So there are many things that we've learned through COVID and that we can continue to help that virus spread, stop the virus spread. So staying home when we're sick to prevent the spread of illnesses. And what does that mean to stay home when you're sick? Well, the province has a self-assessment tool. So if you have symptoms, you can go on there to help you navigate when you should stay home. We know that washing hands is so important, covering your cough, cleaning and disinfecting surfaces is so important. We've talked so many times about the importance of good ventilation. And then I mentioned staying up to date with vaccines. Next slide, please. So the COVID booster that's expected this fall is because while the pandemic was declared over, we know that COVID is a new virus that is here to stay. And so you may have heard in the news this week about new variants, someone in BC that has detected this new variant. That is expected. We expect COVID to change for variants to come about. With these boosters that we have, an updated booster that we're expecting this fall, that it will boost our immunity to give us that longer lasting protection that will help keep us from getting severely ill, and also to prevent long COVID. And just a reminder that long COVID in children, it can present as concentration difficulties or fatigue. So that's certainly something that we want to prevent. Next slide, please. So we have a number of posters that are still available. Again, these routine infection prevention and control measures that we want to continue to adopt. Next slide, please. What about masking? Well, we have learned through the pandemic that well-fitted, high-quality masks do work. They can protect ourselves and others from COVID, from other respiratory infections. As respiratory activity increases in the fall, that well-fitted, high-quality mask in crowded indoor settings with poor ventilation may be important, especially for those who are at higher risk of getting very sick. Next slide, please. Okay, moving along, we are also in schools, grade 7 and 8 schools, providing life-saving vaccines, hepatitis B, meningococcal, and human papillomavirus vaccines. This is our student immunization program, and so we will be going back to grade 7 and 8 schools again. But high school students who may have missed these vaccines, we know many of them missed them because of the pandemic. These expensive vaccines are available for free at our Toronto Public Health clinics for high school students. Next slide, please. And I really wanted to thank you and really all the other school boards for allowing Toronto Public Health to come into your schools. For the past year, we have been focusing on catching students up with life-saving vaccines, and you can see that we've provided a tremendous number of vaccines in schools to over 54,000 students, over 100,000 vaccines. We went to over 500 schools and had over 1,000 clinics across the city. Next slide, please. Now, we are still behind, though, despite the fact that we, have been diligent this past year. This data is just a comparison of our vaccination rates before the pandemic. So if you look at that first chart on the left, those are the school-based vaccines that I had talked about. Before the pandemic, we would expect at the end of grade 7 to get a meningococcal vaccination rate of about 86%. And this past year, we vaccinated grade 7s and only got a rate of 78%. So we are down, and that's the same for hepatitis B. We would expect 77%, and we were down to 62%. And for human papillomavirus, which again prevents cancers, 66% is where we would expect to be, but we were at 57%. And if you look on the right, you can see those routine vaccines that are a part of the Immunization School Pupils Act. The vaccination rates that we have recorded in our records are quite low. And so only 22% of grade 12 students are up to date with those vaccines. Many of them do not have recorded or may not have received an adolescent booster, for example. Next slide, please. So those routine vaccines that are in the Immunization School Pupil Act, they are required, or a valid exemption is required to Toronto Public Health. We have sent out over 100,000 letters this past year, and we will continue to send letters to parents to remind them to get their children updated. And just a reminder that it is a parent's responsibility to report those vaccines to Toronto Public Health through an online portal that we have. Next slide, please. So just also, this is the publicly funded immunization schedule, just a link to it, just to know when children are required for which vaccines. You'll see at the 14 to 16-year age, that's the adolescent booster for diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Next slide, please. So these routine vaccinations are often provided at family doctors' clinics. We know that many people may not have a family doctor or could not get into them. And so these vaccines are also being offered at our Toronto Public Health clinics. Again, they are free. Students in schools in the city can come to one of our clinics to receive them. Next slide, please. Okay, moving along, while we are not reporting and following COVID infections, for example, in schools, there is still a requirement that if principals suspect or have confirmation of a disease of public health significance, so something like meningitis, for example, they are to report it to Toronto Public Health. Next slide, please. We have also initiated our Toronto Public Health School Health Services that we had pre-pandemic, taking that healthy schools approach where we're incorporating health and health messaging into all aspects of school activities and engaging with school communities. So school health services will be available to all Toronto schools, but an augmented level of service will be offered in some schools. And those schools have been prioritized based on indices developed and provided by school boards and by the Ministry of Education. Next slide, please. So there is a school liaison public health nurse that has been assigned to every single school, and referrals can be made to their liaison nurse, but prioritized schools will receive additional supports from this school liaison public health nurse. This includes comprehensive support for school health assessment and planning, staff capacity building, and student and parent engagement supports. And there's a number of tools available on our website. Next slide, please. We are also going to be going into schools to conduct dental screening. This is for all students in elementary school. And so schools and principals can expect to hear from us. Families of children who require dental care and are identified in need can access dental services as well. Next slide, please. And then just wrapping up, the student nutrition program is of course really important as well too, and Toronto Public Health dietitians and inspectors, along with Student Nutrition Ontario and Toronto partners, are available to support the student nutrition program. So we have an email address available to receive requests for questions, and a link to our website that has more details as well. Next slide, please. And again, this slide deck will be available. There are a link to a number of other resources that are also available. Next slide, please. And we've just kept it a short presentation. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you for that presentation. So I have Trustee Dawson.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for the presentation. I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by helping students access dental care if it's identified they have.
So there are criteria in which if a student is eligible for dental services and they meet the criteria, then they can receive dental care through our dental program. And so referrals are made accordingly through the screening program.
Thank you.
Trustee Hastings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will there be a flyer type put out by your department that we can add to our website, that we can add to the websites that we're dealing with? People look at and they see something in the short form and they can use the information. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for trying to share Toronto Public Health messages. This slide deck is certainly something that you can share and has been shared with you. It has links to many of the resources as well. Through the chair, we are also working on some communications that we hope to share with the boards, to share with parents on behalf of Toronto Public Health, and also with principals as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any online? Oh, Trustee Earhart. Oh, excuse me, Trustee Earhart. Trustee McLean was on the list.
Thank you, and through the chair. Can I ask what age the children or young people are entitled to make independent choices about becoming vaccinated?
Yes, through the chair. Ontario has a provincial legislation that's called the Healthcare Consent Act. And in the Healthcare Consent Act, there actually is no age that has been defined. But anyone making healthcare decisions has to be able to give informed consent. And that is where they can understand the benefits and risks of receiving the treatment and the benefits and risks of not receiving the treatment. So they have to be able to understand that and provide informed consent in order to be able to consent on their own. That is within the Healthcare Consent Act.
Okay, thank you. And to follow up through the chair, I guess I was somewhat discouraged, as I suspected that I took from you that you were as well, to the disappointing numbers of the students who missed the opportunity through COVID to get vaccinated and whatnot. So I guess I'm interested in what actions Toronto Public Health is taking besides making the clinics available to those who are so inclined, but to try to remind students the importance of becoming vaccinated and reminding families that although they didn't necessarily get them during those COVID years, that the opportunity still exists so that we can kind of catch them up, if you like. I'm curious about what kind of plans TPH has to circle back and try to increase those numbers that were disappointing initially.
Through the chair, thank you for that question and for really articulating where we're at and that we really need to work on getting vaccination rates higher. And we do recognize that it took 3 years through the pandemic to, not get kids vaccinated. And so it will take some time to get them caught up. We have certainly done many outreach efforts this past year, including we've sent well over 100,000 letters directly to the homes of students and parents for a variety of vaccines and asking them to get vaccinated to come to our clinics. We've had mobile clinics available as well within the communities. We do recognize that we have to address vaccine confidence, which is the reverse of vaccine hesitancy, and that there are issues of misinformation, of trust, of access, of convenience that may be limiting some people from getting vaccinated. We've also heard from many that pandemic fatigue has played in, and that may be a reason why there has been slow uptake for vaccination as well too. So we do have a concerted effort to try and get rates up, but we do certainly value partnerships like with the Toronto District School Board to be able to convey information and to support and engage students and parents as well. I didn't share, but do want to share that last year was the first time we have ever gone into high schools, and we went into every high school to try and catch up, in particular the grade 9 and 10s, because they were in grade 7 and 8 during the pandemic and they missed those school vaccines. So we went into high schools for the first time to provide these vaccines. And if we have capacity, want to be able to do that again, for example. But we have multifaceted approaches, including some social media campaigns, but would be, with that healthy school strategy really would like to get some grassroots supports here as well too. Interested to see the student trustees and how we can get student engagement too, because to your question earlier, at our Toronto Public Health community clinics, students can consent, like high school students often can provide informed consent and can come of their own to receive vaccines as well too. So in a nutshell, there are many things that we are trying. We're expecting for a longer horizon it may take to get these vaccination rates to where they need to be, and it will take a lot of hard effort, including partnerships with yourselves.
One final question, if I may, through the chair. Does Toronto Public Health have any updated suggestions or requirements as it pertains to air quality in public spaces like schools? Recommendations about what's appropriate, what's required along those lines?
Through the chair, we have noted through the pandemic the importance of good ventilation, and through the pandemic, the Ministry of Education did have guidance on ventilation in schools. And so achieving those standards are really what we would recommend.
So I'll pass the chair back to Trustee Chernos-Lin.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. So up next, we have Trustee Earhart. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much. And just a question to the chair for process. I have 5 minutes. Am I able to ask? I would like to move a motion as business arising. Do I also have questions? Do they also fit in the 5 minutes?
No, the business arising motion would be after.
Would be after. Okay, perfect. So just two questions, and thank you so much for the presentation. I did want to ask about long COVID, and just I'm seeing a lot on the news about long COVID since the last time we received a Toronto Public Health presentation last December, and just wondering what new knowledge is emerging and what advice there is for parents and for students and caregivers with respect to long COVID. Thank you very much.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for that question on long COVID. I think it's really clear that COVID as an infection can be very wide, from no symptoms to making you very, very sick to the point that you die. And regardless of the kind of COVID that you had, even if you had a very milder illness, you can end up with this condition called post-COVID condition or long COVID, where you can have symptoms that last for months to even beyond a year afterwards. And we know that many Canadians are suffering with long COVID. We know that the symptoms of long COVID can be extremely varied to things that affect mental health, like depression, anxiety, concentration, fatigue, all the way to palpitations and cardiac issues, and everything in between. And we know in children, long COVID can look different. Now, what we know now about long COVID is that vaccines are really proving to be one measure that can be used to prevent long COVID. Part of the way that vaccines work is they prevent you from getting seriously sick. And we know that if you get a more serious illness, you are more likely to get a long COVID. So that is one thing that we've learned. There have been a number of studies that have talked about different kinds of medications for long COVID, but really there are no real specific medications to treat long COVID. The one thing that we do know is in many people, symptoms do resolve, though it can take quite some time, but in others, symptoms persist. We are still, though, continuing to learn more about this condition as time goes on.
Thank you very much. It's, well, that's scary to hear. It's also hopeful to hear that vaccination is something that we can do as individuals, and as a parent that I can do to help is to vaccinate my child to get the COVID booster. Thank you so much. Now, my next question was about, it's very general about TPH resourcing. I wasn't a trustee at the beginning of the pandemic, but I recall seeing news reports around cuts to public health just weeks prior to the pandemic really hitting our shores. As you know, or as you may know, Toronto District School Board and school boards across the province faced cuts in part due to the removal of COVID-19 supports. I'm seeing in my community that just when we see where we can access vaccines, we used to have so many places in the East End that we felt we could go. I'm a representative in Toronto Danforth, and also the Thorncliffe Hub was one that people would go to. I'm just wondering what's happening with the resourcing picture for this and what it means for access to the supports that families really appreciated throughout the pandemic, and that I believe we may continue to need. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, public health funding through COVID has been, for the most part, 100% provincially funded, which has been really appreciated and certainly has been able to provide really valuable support and work and public health work to the community and the population, and certainly has saved lives. As COVID, the pandemic has been declared over, we're into winding down a lot of the COVID-19 activities. And so, as I understand it, public health will be rolling back into its base budgetary position.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. No further questions, but I would like to move a motion later. Thank you.
Okay, so we still have questions. We still have people on the list with questions. So your business arising motion is noted. We will come back to it when we're done the list of questions. Okay, so up next we have Trustee Pay. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a particular question regarding the dental screening program. So how often those dental screening program being performed by TPH?
The dental screening is something that's completed in every school once a year, and something that we routinely did before the pandemic, and started up again this past school year.
Okay, so what the qualification of those staff who doing the screening?
Through the chair, they are Toronto Public Health staff who are doing the dental screening. There's a wide variety of dental staff, as I understand it, who are doing the screening in the schools.
So are there dentists or hygienists or dental assistant?
Through the chair, I'd have to follow up with you, as that's not directly my program.
Okay, I have another question. So are those children who were identified with dental care need can only access the program through the screening process or during the year? If the parents or the teacher find they have dental problem, because some kids may run into, the parents or, our teachers say, I got toothache. How can those people who need urgent care to access this program?
Thank you for that question through the chair. No, it's not just through dental screening in schools that children who are eligible can access dental care. There are referral processes. There's a lot of information on our website available in those regards, and can certainly follow up on that.
So can TPH provide those information to trustees?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Also, my last question, how many dental clinics are run by TPH in Toronto?
Through the chair, I would have to follow up on that. I don't know what the number is at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, up next we have Trustee Laskin, and then we will have Trustee King.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So if I'm hearing correctly, even though COVID persists and is with us to stay, Toronto Public Health is reverting back to kind of the pre-COVID operations and adding COVID to the list of respiratory diseases that people will get potentially during flu season. Is that an accurate assessment? Because obviously COVID is not over. And yet are we just now thinking of COVID as one of the respiratory diseases that exist for us? I'm just trying to think what the clear message will be from Toronto Public Health about COVID for our families.
Yeah, through the chair, as I did say in the presentation, the pandemic is over, but COVID is here, and COVID is here to stay. It will be an ongoing respiratory infection. We actually don't even know if it's going to be a seasonal one. It may be here throughout the year. It has been declared a disease of public health significance. So that is just a kind of the legal term to say that it is a reportable disease. It is something of public health significance that public health takes action on. The action that we take has changed through the pandemic. For example, we used to be very involved in schools when there were COVID infections, and that's not something that we need to do given the current state. So yes, it is a disease of public health significance. Right now, health units do have 100% provincially funded COVID funds that my understanding will be ending at the end of December.
Thank you very much for that. So the pandemic is over, COVID is here to stay. Has Toronto Public Health advice changed in terms of if a student or staff tests positive for COVID, what they should do? And is that on your website updated?
Yes, through the chair. So actually it's provincial guidance that we have been using. And so if someone, it's really now symptom-based, and it's really to recognize that COVID is one of many respiratory symptoms. So if you have a new fever and cough, even if you test negative for COVID, stay home when you're sick. So the province does have a self-assessment tool that helps to determine when you should stay home The guidance is that you stay home until your symptoms are improving for 24 hours, or if your symptoms were nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea, that you stay home for 48 hours. And that then you can return back to school or to work. But it is recommended that for the duration of 10 days from when your symptoms started, that you wear a mask, especially in indoor settings. And yes, that information is available on our website. We are in the process of updating some of it. It is, though, very, very similar to the information that we had at the end of the last school year as well.
Thank you. That would be really helpful through you, Madam Chair, to TPH. You had on your website, specific instructions for parents and families, and especially with regard to screening. So I think with school starting on Tuesday, I think it would be really helpful if that could all be updated. If it's not already, you implied it might have already been updated, just because there were so many protocols that people had to follow. And if those are changing, I think it's really important that our principals know that, and all our parents and students and staff know that. I certainly would want to broadcast it far and wide. So with appreciation, maybe the director can let us know in conversation after this about when all that updated information will be available to schools. And if I recall correctly, in the past, you have actually sent us a letter that we have then sent out through our systems to our families. And I would hope that there could be a letter to start this school year with all that information, especially emphasizing the routine vaccines that my other colleague has mentioned. I think that to get that to all students and families would also be really important. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to come.
Yes, through the chair, if I could just say, yes, we are actively working this week to have all of those documents updated, and are also working on having a letter for parents and for school staff as well, for principals as well. Recognizing it is a very complicated situation that we're in. We've been through a lot together as a community over the past many years, and certainly want to be able to share the advice, the guidance of what we can do, so that we can, again, keep schools safe, so that if students are not sick, they're in school and they're learning.
Thank you so much. Trustee King, you're next.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you, Dr. Dubé, for joining us tonight, and thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate that we're having this discussion ahead of the school year at the very front end, but I am also already thinking about the progression through the school year. So I'm just wondering if you have any insights, any recommendations as we're thinking about the respiratory viruses, just in terms of trends and timing throughout the year. So I'm wondering if there are any learnings. I'm thinking specifically around the different break periods, so before and after holiday breaks, March break periods. Is there anything that would be different in your suggested actions or communications around those times, or any other kinds of fluctuations in the year?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for this question. And in public health, we call them epidemiologists, who kind of look at the trends of the diseases over time. And we certainly have a lot of that information available on our website. But what we've noticed, we're actually, what we're doing right now is following what's going on in the Southern Hemisphere to kind of get a sense, okay, their winter showed RSV, influenza, and COVID kind of up together and came down in their winter months. So we can expect that in the fall, winter, that may occur. With COVID, we don't really know when another variant is coming. So there could be multiple variants. So we did see last year, for example, that after the winter break, there was an uptick of COVID. Again, in the past year, when we've had our increases in COVID, because of our general broader immunity, either because people had the infection or were vaccinated, or both had that stronger hybrid immunity of infection and vaccination, that despite the fact that COVID circulated, we were all able to manage better as a community. So we might see something like that around the Christmas or a winter holiday time. Classically, that is when influenza tends to peak. We saw COVID then as well. And RSV, of course, was a bad, kind of started early and was a longer season for children last year as well. By March break time in the spring, usually these respiratory viruses are petering out, but sometimes I guess we'll have to wait and see in terms of these viruses, how much they want to outsmart us and come up with new strains or variants.
Through the chair, thank you for that. I appreciate that there are some examples and models that we can look at from the Southern Hemisphere, but also an element of the unknown as to how things will progress and evolve here. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Trustee King. I'm looking to the speakers list. Do we have anybody else on the list? No. Okay, so we do have some business arising. And first I'll turn the floor over to Trustee Earhart. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So just anticipating this presentation, and thank you so much again for the presentation. Trustee King and I are advancing a motion focused on reducing respiratory viruses in schools as business arising. So this is really to advocate for updated standards, guidelines, and funding to continue to reduce respiratory viruses in schools, and so for some board reporting later in the fall to come as part of other reporting we will already be receiving, capital and operating reporting. So I had mentioned I was not a trustee during the height of the pandemic in Ontario. I was one of the parents watching very nervously and frantically these board meetings through webcasts and seeing the many Toronto Public Health briefings. And so every time you hear that Toronto Public Health is coming, you still feel this wave of nervousness. And I can't help it. I'm feeling that wave of nervousness too. I am feeling, and I also want to say to that just how grateful I am to all of the trustees, to the representatives from Toronto Public Health and all the staff here who served throughout the pandemic to do their utmost within the tools, resources, and knowledge available to keep our children safe. And thank you. I do think we are in a new and different phase of the COVID virus and respiratory viruses in schools. We have tools like masking and vaccines, and we have emerging learnings about ventilation and clean air, thanks to some hard work and some strong advocacy to get that knowledge out. So I believe what we need is provincial political will to use this emerging knowledge and to fund action. So I'm hopeful that this motion is a helpful and productive contribution for the TDSB to take a lead role in this next phase of fighting respiratory viruses. Now you'll see I'm still wearing a mask. And for anyone watching tonight, particularly students who for whatever reasons are still wanting to mask, please know it's okay and you're not alone. It's an act of community care to mask when it's advisable to do so and you're able to do so. You'll also see here on my finger that I'm wearing a Canadian Engineering Iron Ring. And so while I'm not a professional engineer, I studied engineering in Canada, and there's been some hard work going on by the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, and I want to thank them tonight. They're referenced in this motion. I believe that the work that they've been doing in recent years is very important, and I'm looking forward to receiving some updates on some of that work and how it impacts us at the TDSB. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have a mover. Do we have a seconder for this? Okay, Trustee King, as a seconder, would you wish to speak? Please go ahead.
Madam Chair, there we go. It's great to be back in here this evening. Great to have the public tuned in again ahead of the school year. I really appreciate Trustee Earhart's leadership on this motion. I know that this time last year, we were both on the campaign trail, as many of people in the room were, and COVID recovery was at the forefront of the discussions at that time. It was also at the forefront of our platforms. That was also the time when the Ontario COVID-19 Science Advisory Table was concluding its work, and it left us with findings around recommending equitable distribution of permanent measures, so including achieving and maintaining air quality to achieve safe continuity in learning. We've heard from Dr. Dubé here in Toronto Public Health that respiratory illnesses are current situation, a current reality that are continuing to be a concern for us. And while we're thankfully not in the situation that we were in September of 21 or 22, the situation has evolved and we still have a responsibility and I believe an opportunity to evolve not only our responses, but our preventative and our long-term measures. The facility team, the facility leaders in the room, online, behind the scenes have provided updates on the very valuable work that's already been undertaken and is underway regarding ventilation specifically. Very much appreciative of that work. And it's on the TDSB website now where folks can review that and can see that for themselves. So thank you for that as well. I think that it's still valid for us to ask, and I think it's what the public is asking, is there more or is there different that we can be doing now? And what is the guidance and the direction for the future? So I really just want to quell any fears up front for anyone in the room, anybody watching, that this isn't a motion about attempting to delve into operational procedures. It's really about enlisting the authority of experts and proceeding confidently. So that means the confidence of the board, the confidence of staff, the confidence of the public, knowing that we're continuing to explore and implement the measures that are most appropriate and feasible to support student health. Just as an example, I know that earlier today, a few of us received an email from a gentleman who I believe is an engineer, and he had some questions, some recommendations about the deployment and the maintenance strategy of portable units to be more equitable based on the type of classroom ventilation. So these are the types of explorations that I believe the public is looking for from us. I am not in any way a public health or facility expert. I'm not an air quality expert. I don't believe my job is to get into the specifics of that, but I do think, I come at this with a thinking about how do we set conditions for equitable achievement and well-being. I think that so much of what we talk about in this boardroom is about setting conditions for effective, equitable learning. This motion is a good opportunity to think holistically about those conditions for learning, and we heard a little bit about that in the presentation. So for example, when we consider student well-being and we have conversations about nutrition, we do that knowing the relationship to learning, the realities of food insecurity and access, and we implement actions and we advocate for support from other levels of government. I think this is very similar where we're considering student well-being, we're having a conversation about air quality and ventilation, knowing the relationship to learning, the realities of the public health and our school environments, and especially where we know the needs are high because they correspond with the hardest hit areas that were hardest hit by COVID. So again, I think it's valid. I think it's wise for us to advocate for guidance and for investment. I believe that with the Ministry of Education focus on math and reading fundamentals, there should also be consideration for the support of stable attendance of both students and staff. So again, I'm not the expert here. I really appreciate the work and the research that Trustee Earhart has done, the diligence of our facility staff, and I'm just very interested in hearing any other considerations or comments from trustees or staff in the room on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee King. We have a speakers list that starts with Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair, I want to thank the mover and the seconder for the motion. I think we learned today, it was confirmed today, I guess, that the pandemic is over and COVID is here to stay in what evolving forms it may. So I think it's our responsibility to endeavor to make all our buildings the safest that we can possibly do. So the concept of trying to advocate for additional funding and additional knowledge to achieve that goal seems like the responsible thing to do to me. So I will be happy to be supportive. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's the final speaker on the list, but before we move on, I just wanted to thank Dr. Dubé for her steadfast leadership and for her willingness to come to our meetings and all of her work during the pandemic, together with Nicole Welch, who we missed this evening as well, and Dr. Davila. You have provided steadfast and tremendous and sustained leadership over really what has been surely a race with very little time off. So thank you for that. I just wanted to say this now because I don't think you've spent so much of your time tonight and it is late, and I don't think you're certainly welcome to stay, but it's not required. So I'm trying to politely let you feel like you're allowed to press leave if you'd like to, but you're of course always welcome to stay. But thank you for your leadership. But you don't necessarily have to stay on to listen to us go on and on and on as I'm doing right now. I realize. Okay, so
if I could, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And Toronto Public Health really values this partnership with the TDSB. And I think we have a lot of shared goals, and the future is bright. And so I just really am pleased with the school board that you are in really embracing these public health concepts and putting them into action. So thank you for inviting us, and do really wish you all the best for the rest of your meeting.
Okay, thank you. It's a love fest all around. Okay, so at this point, I don't see any other questions, so I think we will open the vote on this. Are we voting on eScribe for this? Yes, okay. The vote is now open. For those of you who are not on eScribe, feel free to let us know how you vote.
Priska Naraja in favor.
Okay, I have Nunziata in favor, Patel in favor, Dawson in favor,
James Lisi in favor.
Lee in favor, Hastings in favor, King in favor, Dawson in favor,
Trustee Pay in favor.
Trustee Lee in favor. Trustee Gose, are you on the line still? Patel, oh, actually, I'm not sure about Singham. Trustee Rajagula Singham, how do you vote? Trustee Gose, Trustee Rajagula Singham? Okay, I think we can mark them both as absent.
Hello, Trustee Gose in favor.
Pardon me, how do you vote?
I went to the bathroom, so I'm not really quite sure what we're voting on right now.
What did she say? She's not sure what we're voting on.
Just tell her the promotion. Yeah, I stepped away.
We're voting on Trustee Earhart and King's motion on reducing respiratory viruses in schools.
Okay, I vote in favor for that.
In favor. Oh, in favor. Okay, thank you. Sorry, the sound is doing something funny. It's hard for me to hear. So we have you as noted as in favor. We haven't heard from her. Okay, we also have more business arising. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, we have to close the vote. Getting ahead of myself. It felt unanimous. And it is unanimous, 19-0. That has carried. Okay, so we have another more business arising. Trustee Williams, please go ahead.
Thank you. So the motion, the reformatted motion, was emailed to all trustees. It's there in front of you in eScribe. And this motion comes as the result of collaboration and discussions with the Board of Health and our trustee rep that we have appointed to the Board of Health. So it's regarding the backlog in mental health and psychoeducational assessments, and reads, whereas in the spirit of collaboration and ensuring that the provincial government receives clear and coordinated messages from the TDSB and the City of Toronto, therefore be it resolved that the chair write the Ministry of Health to request that the ministry work in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and local school boards to, one, address the backlog in mental health and psychoeducational assessments, and two, increase priority access to care for students requiring intensive medical health interventions and supports that exceed those available through the school system. And again, this is in response to what we've heard from Toronto Board of Health with regard to the impacts of COVID-19. And we've seen it and heard it again and again of those, I don't know if I should use the word post-COVID, but the impacts of COVID on our students' mental health and well-being. So that's the motion before you, moved by myself. And I believe Trustee Kanzaraja will second.
Trustee Sriskandarajah, are you seconding this motion?
Yeah.
Do you wish to speak on behalf of this
Sure,
motion?
I'll just speak very quickly. Thank you. Again, I think Trustee Williams covered the spirit of the motion very well. And just to reiterate, so this motion is an outcome of, as was mentioned, collaboration with Toronto Public Health, and Councillor Moyes will be moving a motion at our next meeting in a couple of weeks. And so the intent here is to give a concerted message to the provincial government coming from different points in the city to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're advocating for students within the school board and of course beyond. So again, thank you to Councillor Moyes if he's listening, and thank you to Toronto Public Health. That's all for me.
Okay, so I'm going to start a speakers list, and it begins with Trustee Erhart. Please go ahead.
I want to thank you both for moving this motion. In my nervousness for moving a motion, I was not sufficiently rageful against the provincial government for how I've been feeling during this meeting around the lack of funding and supports that I'm hearing about things that our students, that our children need. I am one of the parents that has waited for those psychoed assessments. I'm a wealthy parent. I was able to access through private funding and insurance the reimbursement for costs needed. Every single day since I've taken office, I am hearing from parents who desperately want to help their kids and don't know how and don't have the resources how to. And every day I am talking to superintendents within this school board who know they don't have the resources. I'm so happy you brought forward this motion. And if my rage was not sufficient for what is going on with public health, where they're back to pre-COVID levels, rest assured that I am feeling the rage, my constituents are feeling the rage, and I believe that this is something that we should go full force on. Thank you very much for moving this motion.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Erhart. Can I pass the chair to you?
Sure. Trustee Chernos-Lynn.
Okay, can I just ask the movers? I'm just trying to understand exactly what the steps are in this. The Board of Health is planning to move a motion calling for the same thing
At the next
board
Board of Health
meeting?
meeting.
And when would that be?
September 13th on the Monday. I got to double check, but yeah, it's our upcoming public health meeting.
September.
Okay. Soon. Okay, through the chair. Do we have staff? Could I ask staff for their opinion on this? Are there any concerns with this motion?
Thank you. Sorry, thank you very much through the chair. I know that in this year's budget process, we did receive additional funding from the government specifically for to reduce the backlog of psychoeducational assessments. And so I would ask either Associate Director Zucker or Associate Director Zarisco to add any comments to this motion.
So thank you, and through the chair, through our PPFs, the priorities in partnership funding, the ministry has acknowledged the backlog, and we are receiving $581,000 of additional funding in the 23-24 budget to help us address the backlog. So I just wanted trustees to be aware that there is some funding that has been allocated by the ministry for this purpose.
The chair. I can be assuring the Board of Trustees that through our manager of social work services, Shameen Sandhu, that priority is given to be working on psychoeducational assessments and mental health supports for any students who are waiting. But I would be providing a disservice to the board if I didn't say that there is always a pressure, as Trustee Earhart noted, for students who are needing those supports. And Ms. Sandhu certainly has to balance completing those assessments and servicing students through their regular means of caseload work. Thank you.
And lastly, if I may add, the intent of this motion certainly represent the need that exists across the Toronto District School Board. Just this morning at the forum that was referenced earlier by our partners at SafeTO and Executive Superintendent Spiropoulos, we heard from another Associate Medical Officer of Health who spoke directly to the fact that mental health is a contributor to students' adverse behaviors, perhaps leading to violence, as well as the increase in the number of students, according to a recent study, who report having some sort of mental health distress. It is actually quite alarming. I believe it is at approximately 47%. That is stunning. And so anything we can do in order to provide the various tiers of service our students require, I think it's really pivotal for us to act and appreciate the intent of this motion, which is to put more resources into supporting our students earlier before they experience adverse outcomes.
Okay, thank you for that context. I think that actually having that discussion, and I think perhaps there should be a little, if this motion is successful, which I suspect it would be. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to stand up. I don't know why I'm forgetting. If this motion, thank you, Trustee Patel. If this motion is successful, I would just hope that we would have input from staff on those kind of specifics, because my worry would be that we write this letter and then the ministry comes back with, well, we gave you $500,000 more. Right? So I think we have to contextualize what the needs are, how big our challenges are. I think this is a government that repeatedly says they're really serious about supporting the mental health of students, that's one of their priorities. So I think this is a good avenue. And I think the piece about working with the Ministry of Health is really key to this. We've heard in discussions with the minister that there is some push-pull between all of these different government ministries on the mental health file. So I think it really is, we've talked a lot about collaboration tonight. We need it here too. So I support this motion. I wonder if our timing should be such that we liaise a little bit with the city as we write this letter and they work on theirs, so that we're as collaborative as possible so that we get the best outcome possible. That's just off the top of my head. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I'm passing the chair back to you.
Okay, do we have no further questions? No? Okay. So with that, I think we can open the vote, and this will also be on eScribe.
Trustee Canaraja in favor.
Trustee Gills in favor.
Just 1 second. We're just waiting for it to come up. Okay, the vote is open.
James Lees in favor.
Trustee King in favor.
Dawson is in favor. Yeah. Trustee Pay, how do you vote? He was in favor? Okay. Yeah.
Trustee in favor.
Okay, thank you. Patel is in favor. Okay, thank you. And that has also carried unanimously. So that is a nice unanimous start to the school year, everybody, for advocacy work. With that, we are finished item number 15.2. And next we have item number 16.2, which is the Finance, Budget and Enrollment Committee Special Meeting, report number 13 from August 28th, 2023. And I'll turn it over to staff to introduce this. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, happy to bring forward the report for the special FPEC meeting on August 28th. At this meeting, there were a number of contract awards that were approved, and they're coming forward this evening for receipt as they were approved under the summer approval process. In addition, a school banking resolution came forward as a result of Pace Savings, who provide banking services for school-generated funds, being acquired by Alterna Savings and Credit Union. PIAC will be updated at their next meeting, and the schools will be supported as well. And just to clarify, this wasn't a process to find a new vendor. It was a result of a purchase, and that's why there was no consultation about the change. This is a change because our existing vendor was bought out. And then there was a final report that updated, an update related to the consultant contract award for the mass timber replacement school at Poplar Road Junior Public School. So happy to answer any questions through the chair.
Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any questions. So with that, we will open the vote on item number 16.2. This is for receipt. Oh, we need a mover and a seconder, please. Receipt. Trustee DeVitis, Trustee McLean, thank you. Okay, the vote is open. Thank you. Trustee Gose, how do you vote?
In favor.
Trustee Hastings, how do you vote? Favor. That's in favor. Trustee Patel was in favor.
Trustee Lees in favor.
Trustee Pay in favor.
Trustee King in favor.
Thank you. Trustee Siskandarajah, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. And that has carried. We are now at item number 17. I would just draw your attention to some written notices of motion these will be coming to PPC on September 20th. There's one on student nutrition from Trustee Siskandarajah and Rajakulasingam, and then one from Trustee Dawson and Trustee King, I believe. is the seconder? Yes, okay, on endorsing some statements from the Toronto Youth Cabinet. So keep an eye out for those. And we are at our last item, which is adjournment. And I see Trustee Lilka Rotman got to it first, Trustee Pay second. If it's your notice of motion, that is in private, and we already did it. You want to what? Because it has to do with items that are considered private under the Education Act. Trustee Laskin, you don't have the floor at the moment. Can I ask staff from someone from legal to provide explanation as to why that would be in private session? Do we need to move?
You're in the middle of a
I
vote.
can't finish. Pardon? So
Of course. Sure. Yeah, I will.
I'm going to call a recess for 2 minutes. Give us a moment. All right, trustees. So we have a mover and we had a mover and a seconder. We did. Trustee Pay was a seconder. Okay. It was trustee Local Rotman and trustee Pay were the mover and seconder. So all in favor on adjournment. I remember it was 1-2. All in favor, show of hands. And any opposed? Okay, and we are out of here before 10 o'clock. I was kind of hoping for 8, but we'll take it. I don't know. I don't know, 10.
When I
9.
saw the meeting invite, I was very excited.
Oh,
Thanks, everybody.
one more thing to everybody who's here tonight. This was left in the committee room.